Hi, my name's Larry Ragan. I'm the Director of Faculty Development for Penn State's World Campus. It's a pleasure to address the class today. I've been given an opportunity to talk a little bit about my research in online teaching and instruction, and in particular from a faculty perspective. But I think it's important to keep in mind as a learner in these environments that are becoming more and more common. We're taking more and more either parts of our courses online or the total course online. I think it's important to keep in mind some of the skill sets and competencies you may need as a learner, as a student. So I'm going to try to cover both of those in this little presentation this afternoon. So for a number of years now, I've had the question in my mind of what are the skill sets that are necessary for a faculty member to be successful in the online classroom. I have to tell you the driver of that question, however, is really student-based. My goal is if I can help a faculty member to succeed in the classroom, in this new online learning space, then I'm going to be able to help a student have the success as well. Because when a faculty member is confident and comfortable, they're going to have the ability to concentrate on teaching the course, not worried about the technological infrastructure that might get in the way. So let me walk through a little bit of the research project, and as I said, I'm going to try to connect as many of the dots as I can to students. Either today you're a student in the class, and who knows, maybe in a couple of years you'll be a teacher in an online course, and you might reflect on a few of these ideas. So to start with, I'm going to kind of work through a little bit of this presentation that I've done called Competencies for Online Teaching Success. And the idea behind this is an examination of what those skill sets might be. And I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about how we did the research project and what some of the findings were that, again, might inform you as a student, a learner in an online class, and perhaps as an instructor down the road. First of all, what is a competency? And this is actually one that I had to learn a little bit about because I had a particular idea of what a competency was, only to discover later on that I was thinking of specific skill sets and tasks. And competencies really are a collection, or you might call them sort of a constellation of behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs. And one thing in there that surprised me a little bit was the idea that an attitude can be part of a competency, but we know that teaching online requires the right attitude and the right approach, so we have that in the back of our minds as well. So let me just tell you a little bit about how this project came about. We did it in two phases. We first went out with a survey, and we asked experts in the online learning environment. This included administrators, students, most importantly faculty who had actually taught online, and by the way, lots of learning designers. And we said to them, what are the skill sets you think that are most important for a faculty member to possess before they teach online? We called that phase one. And this is the data really that rolls out of that particular project. We used a 7-point Likert scale. We asked questions, and we asked them in a way to say, here's a particular task or skill. Is this important, very important, not so important, and so forth? A 7-point Likert scale. We administered the survey to over 200 individuals, and we began then looking at how the data clumped together. Interesting data point on this is that when we examined the responses of people who had taught online, say 3 to more times, compared to individuals who taught 3 or less times, the results were negligible. In other words, there weren't real differences between people who had lots of online teaching experience and those who had little. I believe that that's a result of a concept that good teaching is good teaching. So if you know anything about the online environment, it relates to what you did in the face-to-face classroom. So there's a strong correlation there, and perhaps there aren't as many different or unique skill sets you need to teach online. I think there are some, but maybe not as many as we initially thought. So some of the results that came back were kind of interesting. The first thing we did on this was to look at how the data points clumped together. We ran something called a multivariate analysis that allowed us to look at the organization of these competencies. And they grouped into 7 very strong categories, and that's really what I'm going to speak to. Now, these aren't necessarily listed on the screen here in the order that they came in. This is a grouping that I do when I run workshops. I often ask the individuals, what do you think are the most important competencies? And it's interesting how people respond to that question against these 7. The The one that always comes up first, which I'm heartened by, is the active teaching and learning. The fact that engaging your learners, students in this environment and making them part and engaged in that learning experience is so important. That always comes out as number one. Sometimes people think multimedia technology is like number two. Turns out it's really not. At least from our research, multimedia technology falls out near the bottom. It's important, but there are more things that are critical to teaching success than having a good handle on the technology. So this is how I propose it when we do workshops. I say, what do you think of this ranking? And I get people to talk together and they come back. And as I said, they often come out with very close to the scale. This is actually the results here. But there's one difference. The third one is around that teaching responsiveness dimension. And that's something that I think faculty making the transition from a face-to-face to an online environment are not necessarily tuned into. For you, the learner, this is something that I think is really critical, and that is your ability to respond on a regular basis to the class activities, to stay engaged, as well as your instructor's ability to respond in a timely manner. Makes all the difference in the world. If you think about it, if you're an online learner, and let's just say you're isolated, you're in Japan, and you're taking the rest of your classes somewhere in the US, that gap of distance is now exacerbated with time, because your 12-hour time differences, and so when someone posts something you might not see it for quite a while. It's important that the instructor and your peers know that you are there, that you're participating, and that you diminish the effects of that distance and that time challenge. And so that instructor responsiveness, teaching responsiveness, is really an important one. And I'd also say learning responsiveness, your role. The second